everyone, and welcome to the OnlyLandFans show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is JT Olmstead. A successful entrepreneur, tech enthusiast, and family man, JT Olmstead truly embodies the spirit of an Arizona native. Throughout his time, he's built a life marked by dedication, adventure, and a deep sense of community, rooted in his faith and family-centric upbringing as one of 7 children. JT's journey in the professional world began in the dynamic realm of technology, where he worked as a network engineer from 2010 to 2019. This stage of his career allowed him to embrace his inner nerd, indulging his fascination for intricate tech designs and advancements. JT, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you. I've wanted to have you on the program for quite some time now, so I'm so glad we were able to make it work. So let's just jump right in. Tell us, how did you get started in doing land deals?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in investing in general, right? And first, it was very paper-based assets, which I still enjoy, but eventually it evolved into real estate. Started off in buying an office building, and then while I was working through that project, came across kind of a guru on a podcast I was listening to, and that caught my attention because the returns they were referencing seemed astronomical, and they aren't regular as they speak about them, but it caught my attention enough to think, man, if this is even half true, I really need to know more about it because it seems really good. So that led me ultimately to dive into this space, look around at the time, it was about 5 years ago, people were like, there weren't a lot of educators. So I went to the handful that existed and ultimately settled on Seth Williams as the most reliable source at the time. Man, Seth's great. I trust him. Let's take his education. After diving through that, it opened up the opportunity. I started sending some mail, had some good early success, and then stumbled for a while. It took about a year to figure out what I wanted to do. After some early wins, I had some losses and just overall struggles that I had to work through. And so I figured out what's working for me, what's not working for me. And then once I got that dialed in, that's where the ramped growth really started, right? So it was during that time period, I quit my job to really focus full time because I could see what it could be, even if it wasn't that today.
Yeah, that's incredible. And Seth is a fantastic guy, great source of information for sure. So when you first got started, what types of land deals were you doing, your very first deals?
Oh, gosh. So the very first deal, I sent out 300 green postcards to Arizona because that was where I'm at. And it seemed like a natural move. And by happenstance, when somebody calls me back, a few calls at the time, you could do that with 300 green postcards. And I got a call back and one of the guys was like, hey, I own 17 properties in Arizona. I would like to sell all of them. And I was like, that's great. We should do this. So I proceed to drive to every single property in the state. I spent 2 days just driving all over the state, seeing every property, visiting, getting pictures, just getting the whole thing down. And then I meet up with him, he lives about 2 hours north of me. So I headed up north a few days later, met him for breakfast, and we went over all the properties together and just reviewed it. And I said, look, here's the deal. I don't really want 14 of these because they're a mess. They're a hot mess. And even now, not knowing anything, I know I probably shouldn't get involved because I don't think I can get to half of these. And turns out was a tax lien investor, got a lot of these through foreclosure. And I didn't realize the title problems that came with that until later, but that's, where I was at. And that's why he had this inventory he wanted to offload. So we agreed on the 3 that I really wanted to buy. It was the nicer of the set. And we agreed on a price. And so I met him with a cashier's check in hand at his bank. And he signed the deeds and I bought the properties. So
wow. Wow. And what kinds of properties were those? Were they large acreage, medium? What types of properties were they?
Yeah. So there was a pair of 80 acres off on the very western edge of Maricopa County. And they were touching, I think, Yuma County on that side. And so there was 2 kind of blocks there. That I went out to those properties, totaled my car and came home. But that was good. That worked out though, because that ended up being a good deal for those 2. And then that was 2 of the 3. And the third one was in Pinal County, south of Casa Grande, if you guys know where that's at. And in that area, it was 20 something acres. At the time, during my year of experimentation, I thought, someone mentioned, why don't you just break them up into 5? Why don't you break them up? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I've never done that. So I was like, okay, let's try it. This year is about trying things. So I went out, I figured out what that took. I found a surveyor. I had them come do the work. I submitted the documentation and went through the approval process and got it all done. And then I rented the equipment, went out and cut myself a road. And so I go get I drag it out there and spend a day and a half just clearing bushes and cutting in a road inside of the easement. And then I proceed to, because I need it for power and access and whatever. So now I have 5 lots, they're accessible. I've cleared out the old ditches. I had people haul off trailers, and it was a mess. That property was a mess. But so it was quite a project to get through all that as a first experiment, but it let me see, this could work out. And then I ended up selling all 5 to the same person, because why not? But
wow. Yeah.
but
Nice. Yeah. So that sounds like you were pretty hands-on, like right out the gate, right? Like cutting your own roads and everything. Your very first experiences with deals in the land space were subdivides?
Basically, yeah. Like
wow.
of the first properties I bought, I subdivided one of them. Yeah.
That's incredible. So let's talk about, because you mentioned that you had some wins. Do you remember what those numbers look like for those deals?
Yeah. So the first set of 3 properties I bought for $50,000 cash. And then from that, the way I attributed the value was like $20,000 to the 160 acres at the time, and then $30,000 to this 20. It was 25 acres. The 60 acres I sold on owner financing for about, I think it was $80,000. I'd have to double check, but should be. So we got a pretty solid win out of that one. It was like 10 or 15,000 down, and then the rest over. I think it's the longest I've ever. It was like 15 years, which I've never agreed to since. But at the time, I was like, all right, sure, 15 years, why not? So that guy's still paying, great. And then the other one, I cut up 5 ways, did all this work, experimented, and that gentleman came in and bought them for about $85,000 with $40,000 down, and then I owner financed the rest of that. So I ended up getting my cash back on the down payments from both of those deals, and then just had 2 really solid notes who are still paying to this day on both of those.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. You mentioned that you hit a slump after those early wins. Talk to us a little bit about that. What was that like?
Yeah. So after that first batch turned out so well, I was like, I'm going to send a gazillion letters, and I just won't even know what to do with all the money I'm going to make. Because clearly if 300 can make a $50,000 return or whatever, then 5,000, I will just be rolling in it. So I sent out 5,000 postcards shortly thereafter and proceeded to get 2 calls and 0 deals.
Oh.
It was a complete reversal. So that was the nice, humbling check. I got smacked over the head and was like, okay, so that was a fluke. Thank the Lord that worked out. So I know it does work, but the rest, now I know there's some more work involved to make this a real business. So I better buckle up. So that was the first reality check. And then after that, I proceeded to have some kind of mixed deals. I had a deal that I bought it 100 and then sold it 120, 18 months later. And so it was I did okay. It wasn't great. And I had a couple of these deals up and down, some wins and some so-sos. But it took a year of muddling through that, mailing for infill lots and getting larger acreage. And then at the end of that, really 18 months, at the end of 2019, I realized, and I quit my job by this time, and I was like, I'm going to make this work. I realized, what deals do I really enjoy? What worked well? What didn't work? What kind of sizes and so I really took the time to step back and decide. And I realized that I really liked the 5 acres and up was my preferred move, rural 5 acres. Those seem to be the best buyers, easiest to move, simplest to deal with. So that's what I preferred. So then once I realized that's what I wanted, then it was easy to dial it in and stop messing around with other things and really start cranking out the mail and pushing on that front. And that was really what led me to where I'm at, is that focus. And now we work in, I sent mail to random places and took deals in probably a dozen states, but I really only focus in 2 states right now, because I realized that focusing in on the kind of land and the markets that I prefer is really what's get me to this efficiency I want before I move to even bigger scale.
Yeah, I love that whole idea of testing and iterating and then niching down on what you really enjoy doing. That way you can become a specialist in that. Is that what you do now? Your specialization is those 5 acres and up rural type properties? Is that what you specialize in now?
Yeah, and it feels our niche, it's a subsection of the niche. I wouldn't even call it a niche of the niche, but it's because 5 acres and up is huge, but we'll take anything pretty much 5 acres. And now we mail about 3 acres and up is our kind of our low end. But that we decided largely at this point, we don't want to get involved in infill lots because we don't like the only exit being a house, or effectively 90% of the exit being a house, right? We like to have multiple exits if a house for some reason just doesn't quite fit very well. And so we prefer that larger-ish acreage, 3-5 and up. And so that is what we do. We just do that in the 2 states we work. And that has allowed us to we mail the entire of both states at once, or we mail all of it, because we know that this is what we want. We know a lot about those. We've mailed them multiple times, and we've slowly pulled out the stuff we don't want until we whittled it down to just the best.
Yeah, definitely a great example of riches in the niches, right? There's a reason why that old adage kind of sticks around. I love what you were talking about in terms of how these 3 to 5 plus acre type parcels give you a lot more flexibility on the exit. So what types of opportunities or exit opportunities are you seeing with these larger parcels that are not just restricted to just maybe a house?
Yeah, at least we found so far that the buyers, as we all know, they fall in a couple of buckets, right? So we've got the standard recreational buyer who's, I want a second home, I want a house, I want a whatever. They really want to live there. That's great. That's a great buyer pool. We also have just straight up like land bankers who are just like, yes, I don't price per acre. If it's low enough, I will take it because I just like the area and I want to own a bunch of land. Fantastic. Those are good too. And then we've got the recreational place where it's like they want to hunt, they want to camp, they want to brag about 20 acres, whatever it is, they want this experience, right? They usually fall in one of those buckets primarily, and that allows that for the recreational pieces. And so that allows us to take a look and say what attributes are going to apply to what group, and then what price do we think it can command based on that attribute. And sometimes the attribute is the price, right? So like a so-so piece of land, but as long as you can legally access it and physically access it, then if there's no other sellable attributes, just have to get it cheap enough that a land banker is going to be like, that is an amazing price per acre for this county. I want it, right? That is the selling attribute, right? As opposed to having great topography and amazing views and great access to water, whatever. There's lots of other reasons. But if I don't have any of those, then it has to be, a key sellable attribute to the group that we're targeting.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And so are you selling, I'm sure it's different for different buyers and different buyer buckets, but are you finding that you're doing mainly cash, mainly notes? What's your exit look like?
Yeah, historically, it's always been a mix. Last year was very cash heavy for whatever reason. We sold a lot of cash and not a lot of notes. This year, we're getting much more into notes. In fact, the last 5 properties we put under contract to sell have all been owner financing. So we're seeing a heavy tilt towards notes at this moment. We'll see how the year plays out. It might just be a batch we're in right now, but I could probably speak more to that at the end of the year, and we'll see how the year. I think that like macroeconomic factors are interesting to see how that coincides with like how our buyers react on what they're looking
for. Sure, yeah. Are you closing on all of these yourself, using your own money, using other people's money? What is your buy strategy?
Yeah, we don't do assignments or innovations of any kind. We only do cash purchases. And so that is a combination of business cash, business debt, and private money.
Excellent. So how do you go about raising private money for these deals?
Yeah, that's very friends and family oriented, or like sometimes strategic business relationships. I mean, I'm always looking for the right way to raise money as we continue to grow year after year. So you're like, I know how much I've got, and I think I need another extra. Like, where's the next section come from? So that's ever evolving question. But as of this moment, like it's all like existing networks for private money, right? And we typically raise, because it's existing relationships, like solid relationships, those are unsecured business lines effectively. And then the rest are business debt and private money.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So you mentioned earlier how the macroeconomic layout is affecting the land business a little bit, but let's go a little bit deeper into that. Where do you see the market going now? And what, if anything, have you done to shift or pivot or just change your approach to make sure that you're thriving in this market?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do not have a crystal ball, nor do I try and guess the future most of the time. Like it's just no friggin' way. But I like to look in hindsight and see what the patterns have been, but to be able to look back and say, oh, it's interesting to see as I say in my personal business and kind of inside of my land network, like what are those experiences? Like, for example, we late last year, probably Q3, Q4, we were like, okay, we cannot buy things Q2 of 2022, I would have bought something at 60 cents on the dollar if I liked it. Now I'm not buying above 50 cents on the dollar. It's just not happening unless it is a ridiculously good deal. Like I think I can sell it in 2 days. I'm not even getting above 50%. It's just not worth the risk, especially because we're all capital. That's one move that we've made and we do not regret. Saved us a couple of times. And then now it's like watching it. How does it play out on the selling side and on the advertising side? Q2 going into Q3, I've personally seen, and I've heard reports of like a slowdown in, especially for direct mail and other acquisition sources as well, like how the difficulty level of obtaining land has increased, right? So the yield is starting to drop on that, which has been interesting to see play out at different sizes of businesses. And obviously it's not 100% the same story. I've got pockets of investors who I talk to tell me, yeah, ours is still getting the same great yield. A lot of people are saying not as good as it used to be. On the sales side, again, I see for us personally, and we've seen that a little bit, the yield has dropped on our acquisition marketing. On the disposition side, we also start to see a slowdown, right? So our days on market has began to creep up, right, over time, over the last 6 months. And so we're doing even more than we were. So 6 months ago, I don't think I had ever, maybe with one exception, cleared a property or done a lot of on the ground work to make it nice. Now we consistently say, if it's above 6 figures, I want to spend $2 or $3 grand to get somebody out there to landscape. They need to be able to park on the property. Like all these things have started to change for us because we know that the buyer pool may be getting smaller. So we need to make sure we're higher up the rankings. And so we're doing a lot more like physical signs on the property. In fact, one of our best moves earlier this year was to spend $1,000 and put a huge billboard style, like a plywood level sign on a piece of property. And that has sold, like we had 5 lots in there. It was just a quick minor land division we did. And we sold 2 or 3 of them just off that one sign. And so that's fine because these were $250,000 lots. So like $1,000 for that, no problem. But we've never considered something like that until we realized it's got good road access. People got a lot of traffic. Why aren't we putting a sign up here that's more than just like a bandit sign? We need something serious to show them like this crap is worth buying. We've just seen those kind of trends for us. We're getting more serious about our strategies around dispositions and making sure that we have those steps like checklist and in place. So we're not skipping steps because we find if we skip a step, it tends to turn around and bite us. Easy example. We've had something on the market for like maybe 60, 70 days. Haven't been getting hardly any traction on it. We're like, man, it's so messed up. Why aren't we like, this is a good property, decent price. Why aren't we finding somebody? And we went back and realized, have we put a sign out here? Answer was no. It was a good road. We put the sign out 2 days later under contract. So sometimes you don't want to skip that step because you'll regret it when you realize and fix it later. You're like, dang, I could have saved myself 2 months if I had just done that in the first place.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic insight. So let's talk a little bit about your dispo processes. What does that dispo flow look like? Do you guys handle all of that in-house? Do you work with agents? What does your dispo process look like?
Yeah, our disposition on the agent side has been sparse. We don't typically use agents. I have on occasion, and I would consider it in the future with the right property. We have one now we're considering, but generally speaking, we don't. I like to keep it in-house because I prefer all of my buyers to have a consistent experience. And I just can't control that with the amount of ground that we cover right now. I cannot have one agent that covers one state, let alone 2 states or so. I want this experience to be the same. We do lose out a little bit on not being able to meet them personally on the ground. But oftentimes, because we flat list the majority of our properties, that their agent takes them on the ground. So we don't miss a lot on that. And we find that a lot of our buyers tend to be pretty adventurous in the rural sector anyway. So they're like, yeah, we can go find it. Give me a map, or is the corner marked or whatever. Just find a way for them to quickly identify the property. And so we'd like to keep that in-house. We have it running right now. I run a super small team. So I have the same person doing acquisition side and the disposition side. We're shortly we're hiring to split that in the next 2 months because we need a full-time disposition person. We're getting just too much volume. And with where we're heading next year, there's just no way that they'll be able to do both or continue to do both. Yeah, I think that is something that can offer like a lot of opportunity to lower the days on market if you can put the right structures and like personnel in place.
Yeah, I think that's really super smart. I love that you talked about the customer experience, making sure that's consistent with every buyer and that you're treating the buyers like customers. I think in the land business, we have the customers that are on the sell side and the customers that are on the buy side, and just making sure that's a cohesive experience through that customer journey. I think that's super important. So I love hearing about that. Digging a little bit deeper into dispo, if someone's listening to this and they're like, man, he's running his own dispo, he's at a pretty substantial volume, I'm having trouble selling this lot that I've had forever. What tips and tricks would you have to share with someone who may be having problems actually moving their property through the dispo phase? Hey, land fans, looking for your tribe of serious land investors? Join thousands of your fellow land lovers in the OnlyLandFans Facebook group. We're talking real deals, expert strategies, and game-changing connections you won't find anywhere else. This isn't just another real estate group. This is the community where land investors come to level up. Join us at OnlyLandFansGroup.com and join the conversation today. That's OnlyLandFansGroup.com. See you there.
Yeah, there's a lot of the kind of the standard answers: be everywhere. So just make sure that you are everywhere you need to be. Understand your local requirements. Sometimes a local agent is the best option. I've had properties that sat for months until we listed it with the local agent, and then it's sold in days or weeks. You need to understand, it really comes back to what we talked about earlier, understanding your buyer. If you understand your buyer, you know what they're looking for. Are they looking for the cheapest option? Are you offering owner finance because that's what your buyer wants? Are you making sure that you are in a place your buyer will find you? Are you putting physical signs out? Are you making sure that their experience is a good one, that they roll up and they can get out and see the property? Some of my properties, we drive up and it is a jungle and there's nowhere to put the car, and like that, they're just going to drive up. If they're like hardcore enough to grab the machete and make a trail, great, but most of the time they're not. And so it's never that a property won't sell. And it's never that a property won't sell at the price you want. It's a matter of how long you want to wait. Right? If I waited 100 years, of course I could find the perfect buyer at the perfect price, but I don't want to wait 100 years. Nobody does. So you have to decide, how quickly do you want to sell this thing and at what price you're willing to do it. If I'm going to pay someone $10,000 or $10 million, I can sell anything, right? Because I'm paying them to take my property, right? So there's always a price, right? And there's always a timeline, but you have to decide, what confidence do you want? Are you willing to drop the price to a low enough number that your buyer pool gets big enough to find that person on a quick timeline? Or are you willing to wait a super long time and work with a small buyer pool because you want a high price? It's a confluence of a couple factors, and you have to decide which lever is most important to you. If you want a high price, then you have to double down on making sure that every single person possible is seeing it. And you have to make sure that they have an amazing experience when they go to see it, right? Like you have to focus on the other two because you want that high price and you want a fast time, right? So you can't have it all. You just got to decide which part of this triangle or whatever you're going to focus on and put your emphasis there.
Yeah, that's really good. And so if someone's, okay, how do I get it in front of as many people as possible? I know that it's a hit or miss thing. Sometimes there are people that love Facebook Marketplace, people that hate Facebook Marketplace. Some people use land.com, some people don't. So what do you personally use to reach your buyers?
Yeah, the vast majority of our sales do come through land.com. So we are like heavily invested there. We're at like thousands of dollars a month with them. We also sell quite a bit through Flatlist MLS. This is, again, for the kind of arena that we work. And we'll keep folks in that region. And I apologize here.
Oh, you're good.
If you can hear that. Yeah, so we'll continue to focus on that area, right? Because we know that we need to be where these buyers are. Land.com, Flatlist MLS, physical signs. We'll go out and try other things like land search. We've been having more leads with lately. We've tried things like land flip or land moto. We'll try pretty much anything. In fact, I'll throw money at almost any land.com competitor just so they can possibly succeed, because land.com needs to be knocked off their pedestal because they're not that great, but they have such massive market share that I have to keep working over the money. So it's like anybody who I think's even promising, I'm like, here's some dollars, please succeed. Just go out there and try it. But we try all kinds of platforms. But if we, after 6 to 12 months, aren't getting any serious buyers off there, we'll just drop it and move to somewhere else. And maybe we'll look back around in a couple of years if we think they're promising again. But we are willing to try all kinds of things. We just don't know where the buyer's going to be. And a lot of times, if our margins are usually, our average is like $25,000, $30,000 in margin per sale. So that's enough that I can pay for one platform for a year to be able to like get one buyer off there. That's worth the investment as long as the cost isn't too high.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of continuing in the disposition vein, you mentioned that you do sell on terms and that you do create notes. Can you talk to us a little bit about what are some rules of thumb? How do you structure your note deals Do you have hard and fast rules, or do you play it and figure it out? How do you go about structuring your notes?
Yeah, the rule of thumb we use for our note terms is money back in 12 months. That's our litmus test. We will occasionally fudge that higher if it's a property we've had trouble moving, but typically it's money back in 12 months, minimum of $5,000 down, minimum of $350 a month. So for where the space we work in, those tend to be acceptable. And it also puts us in a position, because we only do deed of trust, we don't do land contract. We want to be in a position where we have enough capital to foreclose if necessary. So those down payment minimums are pretty stiff for us. We don't usually flex on those. And that allows us to tend to get a pretty higher quality buyer. My average note payment is $700 or $800. And we tend to just get people who are invested in the property, pay, and then just keep paying. It's rare for us to have trouble with our notes. And so that's been good, which is why I'm willing to do them, because if they were a pain in the butt, I don't really want to do them. Obviously, I'm the founder over at Your Land Loans. So we use our Your Land Loans platform to take care of the notes, which helps, but it's still there's still work involved. You got to keep those borrowers working no matter what. So.
If you're enjoying this episode of the OnlyLandFans podcast, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. Now let's get back to the action. For sure. And so do you offer interest rates? What's your interest rate?
Yeah. So we do right now, our standard interest rate is 11.9. That's what we've moved to the last couple of months. And we will make concessions on that. If someone wants to make a good down payment and pay it off in a 12-month term, I've had people put $30,000 down and pay $5,000 a month for several months until they pay it off. I'll give them 0% interest on that. If it's under 12, I think IRS will not balk at that. So we will allow that under 12 months. Over 12 months, there's always an interest rate, and it is typically close to 11.9, or if they want to put a really large down payment. We're not super religious about most of our terms when it comes to notes. We just have to have the right, it's a lever thing, right? So we're like, hey, if you want to have a lower interest rate, you need to put a really huge down payment down. Are you willing to do that? No. Okay. Then the interest rate has to stay high. You can't have it all. So we just work with them to find the right connection where we have our money back in 12 months and we feel like we're getting a solid return on the loan we're offering them.
That's great. And so what is the maximum amount of time that you'll offer a note for?
Typically it's 7 years. The absolute maximum is 10, but that would only be if we're doing $200,000 loans. If we're doing a much larger multi-six-figure loan to them as part of the deal, then we'll consider moving that up, because it's one thing, you're making $2,500, $3,500 payments, then they start to get to that point where they're like, hey, can we just move a couple more years? It's a little higher, because then we could get that down just a bit. We'll start making some concessions there, but generally we cap at around 7.
Yeah, that's great. And do you let's say, do you have cash prices and term prices that are different for each property? And if so, how does that work? How do you figure that out?
Yeah, that's also a sliding scale. So on the lower end, if we're selling something at $30,000 or $40,000, we typically have two different prices, right? So the cash discount is 34, and then our our full price is 37 or 38. And so we'll just be upfront about that. And it's one of those negotiation points that we're not hard on, but is part of the conversation. When we get above $100,000, that's where we typically don't delta between them. We just have one price. That we find those buyers are more they get more indignant if you try and split pricing with them. So they just want a single price, and then we negotiate all the terms.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Some really good insight. So let's talk a little bit about what your average deal looks like. Do you have a price range in terms of what the value is? I know 3 to 5 acres and plus, it could be a huge range, but do you have an average price range that you guys typically work in?
Yeah, our right now in the last 24 months, our average deal is buy at 20, sell at 60. Though historically it's right around there, buy at 20 something, sell at 50-ish. Obviously, it slowly evolves over time, but that's typically where we're sitting. But that means we don't buy anything below 25,000 market value. If we don't think we can sell at 25, we just don't like dealing with buyers below 25. And we bought stuff that's several $100,000. So it just depends on what the deal is.
Awesome. So we've talked a lot about dispo. I'd love to back up and go to the acquisitions part now. So
sure.
What is your favorite methods of marketing on the acquisition side?
Yeah, so it's all direct mail for us. We have played with texting and pay-per-click and flirted with cold calling, things like that. But we found that direct mail is what delivers our best results, best yields. And it fits our team dynamic the best with the way we've designed our business. Because we run all blind offer, so we don't run neutral anything. So neutral text doesn't work well with a blind offer machine. So we're like, yeah, it's not going to work out so hot, which we quickly discovered. So we're really doubling down on that. I subscribe very heavily to like the Hormozy logic where it's one channel, right? Like I need one product, one channel. Like this is it. Like I'm not big enough yet to even talk about running out of things to do inside of my channel. So I don't know why I keep getting distracted by other channels. Like when I'm doing 50 million a year, then I'll say, man, maybe I should expand channels, but that's not it today. Yeah. I'm trying to stay focused on land, specifically on mail.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you mentioned that you're finding yields are starting to be a little bit lower in this market. What is your typical deal to letter ratio?
I don't even track my deal to letter ratio. All I track is return on my marketing for the most part. And we're really looking for a 10x on the marketing spend. And whether that's buying a $20,000 property or $200,000 property, I don't really care. What I really care is I spent $150,000 in mail. How much am I going to get in profit for that? That's where we stay focused. And we're looking for 10x. That has been slowly floating down. I think our last mailer, which wasn't that hot, was like a 4 or 5x. And we're like, hey, what did we do wrong? It was a bad timing. We're experimenting. Before that was like 7, 8x. No, actually, I think that was closer to 10x. So sometimes those long tails, you got to be like, wait, it took 4 months for a deal to come in from that mailer. It's tough to nail down too early. Usually I don't like to nail down more than 3 months out. But I think we're close to 10x on that earlier mailer. We've done 2 mailers this year. One 100,000 unit mailer in April, and then the last one was a 60,000 unit mailer in July. The July one, the jury's kind of still out, but I think right now, we're looking at 4 or 5x at the end of the day.
So what does your mail cadence look like? You mentioned that you did 2 mailers so far this year. Do you just do them all at the same time? Do you do them every other week, or what is that?
Yeah, we have another 100,000 unit mailer going out tomorrow. So we just do one shot all at once, and then that's our cadence.
Nice. And so are you remailing to people? Do you have them on a sequence? If they don't respond, they just get the letter again. Is it the same letter every time that you mail? What does that look like?
Right now, that is very much in flux, to be honest. Because of these yield problems we've been having, we've been experimenting a lot more. So it's hard to say what it is and will be. I can tell you what we've done, but it's not, I can't guarantee that's what it will be next week. Right now, we have been mailing the same letter to the same batch of people. And then over the last 2 mailers, we've been experimenting more on different letter types. This plan as of today for next year is to alternate between letter types next year and pretty much target the same group. I think that as a niche, generally speaking, we're too hesitant to send people mail too close together. Right? Like you talk to a lot of these house guys, they're like, oh yeah, I send the same letter every 6 weeks. And you're like, wait, what? Every 6 weeks you said? Every 6 months sounds aggressive in the landing.
Right,
so it's like, I don't know why I'm so afraid to send it every quarter. So we're definitely upping that cadence next week or next year. So this will be our last mailer for the year, and then we'll give us some time to reset to go into Q1. But that's our strategy. I figure I could do that. I could absolutely be sending in more mail. So I think we'll probably touch the targets probably 3 or 4 times next year. Probably once a quarter is probably the rough number. And we'll be expanding our markets a little bit as well, because we're capping out where we're at. Either we're going to expand our property type or our markets. And I think we're going to go markets instead of property types.
Nice. So I know that you mentioned that you're very niche. You're working within a niche of a niche. So I'm pretty sure that you've got these property values like locked down in terms of your blind offers, because you've been mailing to these areas and to these specific types of properties. But if someone's listening to this and they've been doing neutral letters for quite some time and they want to get into the blind offers, what would you suggest that they do, just in terms of a simple process that they can figure out what to offer before they send their mail out? That way they can implement that blind offer strategy.
Yeah, I would recommend they don't go from neutrals to blind offers is my short answer. I think that if you have built your company with neutral in mind, you have a really strong sales team who's ready to get them on the phone, build a relationship, and close them. Whereas with blind offers, we built our company so that the leads that call us are highly qualified. Unless you're really interested, you're not calling us. It's really rare to get somebody who's like ambivalent. They're like, I don't know, I'm not sure, maybe. That doesn't happen a lot. They're basically like, I saw your price and either I hate you or I'm in. That's the two emotional responses we get. If you build a company to say, just catch this vague interest and then turn it into a sale, I would recommend they move to range letters first and see if they like general pricing and how that plays out. And if that works for them, then they can consider going all the way. Because when we price for blind offers, it takes months. I have a guy full-time for the last 2 months pricing one state. It takes a long freaking time to price it correctly. So either go ranged offer and take your existing sales acumen and combine those things, because you can be more general with range and it doesn't have to be as precise, or be ready to go all in on your pricing. Because we have thousands of lines of pricing per market we work at. We have really detailed pricing because we need it to be as accurate as possible, because failing to be accurate either overprices, underprices, or they just don't call us.
Listen up, land fans. This is huge. We're bringing you the one and only Pace Morby, star of A&E's Triple Digit Flip and the mastermind behind $450 million in real estate deals. He's coming to our virtual meetup on Thursday, December 5th to share how he's applying his creative financing genius to land deals. Head to olfmeetup.com to save your spot today. That's olfmeetup.com. This is the kind of opportunity that changes everything. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially, I love that piece that you mentioned about how it really depends on the structure of your business. It's not as easy as to say, oh, we're going to switch from neutral to blind. It's not just changing the marketing piece, it's changing the whole structure of your acquisition process. So that's a really good point. How do you guys go about pricing in an area that you might not be familiar with? If someone's okay, I think I want to do these range offers, I want to dip my toe in that water, what are some good rules of thumb to figure out how to go about pricing?
Yeah, so assuming it's a disclosure state and you can reasonably get the data, pricing a area is very much like pricing a single property. You basically have to go in and say, all right, let's start by generally looking at a section of a county or a zip code or whatever. We get as detailed as we can, but we'll look down to a particular portion of property and say, okay, what is the price range consistent from 3 to 5 acres? How about 5 to 10 acres? How about 10 to 15 and 20 and 40 and 100 acres? So we'll look at where we think the price breaks are along that line and then establish those price breaks and then go back and say, okay, now what is the price between 3 and 5 acres? Okay, and then we'll basically price a theoretical 4 acre in there and then see what we think the price per acre is given, whatever general comps we can find that has the attributes that we know we look for, which are, access and sellability, crap like that. So we're like, okay, look, it's not garbage topography and you can get to it. Cool. Then I can use that as a comp. And then we establish a price per acre and we note it on our sheet. And we go through all of the acreage ranges in that general area. And then we move to the next area. We make our areas, again, as small as possible, right? And that takes a little bit of technical prowess and a lot of time, but you can put together ways to block stuff together in a tight formation and then price without pricing a single property, pricing a group of properties at the same time. So that's what we do. We go through all of it, price it all in groups, and then note it on this massive master pricing sheet we have.
Yeah, that sounds like a topic for a fantastic masterclass. In fact, it can be pretty intense, right?
It can be quite intense. Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the actual area. How do you target an area to market to?
Are you talking about where to send mail? Is that what we're deciding?
Yeah. I know that you've been in the markets that you are in for quite some time now. But if you were to choose another market, what would be some advice to someone who is looking to pick a new market? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I'll answer this question 2 ways. So one is in the existing markets we are in, we actually don't pick markets, we pick states. That's our state. That's our market. So we pick an entire state. And then we, in reverse, say, where do we not want to mail? And then go through and say, this county is half of the city of Atlanta. I don't want that. Next, we'll just pull the whole county. And so we'll go through and eliminate county by county stuff that we just don't want to mail there. So we basically start with everything and take out the stuff we don't want, and we see whatever's left. And then in order for us to, so that's one part of our logic. And prior to that, though, like I'll tell you right now what I'm doing, which is deciding on a third and or fourth state to go into. And that is determined by a couple of different factors, I should say. The main factors for me are lending rules, right? What is it like to foreclose on a property here for a non-owner occupied piece of dirt? What is it? Because the rules are different. Sometimes they have insane 3-year buybacks. I don't want to be in a state I can't owner finance right now. I'm not interested in that. So because of that, I have to make sure that if I deed of trust this thing or security deed it, that I can get it back without waiting 5 years, something insane. Number two, what is the loan origination rules like? Because there are some strict rules in the US about originating loans. And sometimes you can put yourself in some serious legal hot water by not paying attention to those if you originate 5, 10, 15 loans in a year. So you got to kind of keep an eye on those if you do owner financing. Number three, I look at not as serious, but like taxation. I'm like, what are their income taxes? It's really nice to work in a state where you don't have to pay income tax because then it makes it way easier on filing time. So that's just a nice little bonus I like to keep an eye on. And then number four is like general size of the market, right? Is there enough land here to keep me busy? Or is this going to be just like, I'm going to put a lot of work into one random state that doesn't have that much land? And then number five is like general market conditions, right? Like how is the land sold, right? Is there enough action going on, enough movement? Is there enough existing land market, not just land to be sold, but people actually buying and selling land that's going to make it worth sticking around there?
That's really good. Off the top of your head, have you come across any states that you're like, I know I will never send one mailer to ever?
Yeah. So for me, that's California. I love California. I spent a couple of years there, but I will never do business there. It's a nexus state. I can't deal with it. There are other states like that where they have rules where it's like, dealing in this state becomes incredibly complicated. And I just don't think it's worth it yet. Now, I'm not saying never, but the answer is yet. Like I have easier fish to fry before I get to that part. And I worry about moving into this untapped market. So I think I can max out my business size much faster, not trying to get into really complicated states, unless I want to niche down. Like, unless I was like, hey, I'm going to go all in on this state and master it. Great. By all means do that. But as where we're at now, we need repeatable scale. And so I'm not interested in a lot of those states. I don't know that I have a particular list for you. I'd have to go to my documents and be like, because I have notes on a lot of these things. I'd be like, all right, let's see. New Jersey. Okay, that's not going to work. So I just have to look that up.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. That's a really good insight. And so you just mentioned scale. What was the scale process like for you going from a beginner, figuring out what didn't work, figuring out which niche you wanted to be in, and then scale? What did that scale process look like for you?
We talked about the stumbles at the beginning, right? Where it was just like, what is this? I basically sometimes say I got tricked into starting a business because I thought I was investing in real estate. And it turns out I was starting a business, right? That's how it ended up playing out. And so that was the first business I've ever run, really. And so I didn't really know anything about business. There was a lot of learning about just general business. And that transitioned into taking learning about land, learning about real estate, and taking the time to learn about how to run a proper business. Those just took time. It took time to learn it the hard way and learn what I could from books and other resources and my network, et cetera. And so that really was like an evolution. We double every year as we look at like where we're at, where we want to go, and then what we need to do better. And that has transitioned into mastering land, into more like mastering teams now, right? Because like I love leveraging software. I'm good at it, but there becomes like there's a limit there. So now I have to learn, my leverage has to move from software and systems to people, because I try and keep my team small as possible, but people are a fantastic form of leverage, and I need to like be better at utilizing that. So that's the phase we're in right now, which is like scaling the team. Could probably doubling our team or maybe tripling our team in the next 12 months. That's going to be a lot of where I'm focused.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Congratulations on that growth. That's really awesome. And I cannot tell you how much I resonate with the whole idea of it is completely a different animal to manage and run a business than it is just like flipping one or two pieces of property a year, right? Like those are two completely different beasts, right? Continuing in that vein, What resources or entrepreneurs, business owners, thought leaders do you like to follow around that space in the business and growing business?
Truthfully, I don't spend a lot of time consuming most people's content. The only exception to that is Alex Hormozy, who I just can't stop watching. I don't know why, but
Same.
I got introduced to that guy earlier this year, and I was like, I don't know why I keep watching his videos, but I just can't stop. So I don't spend a lot of time tracking individuals. I'll consume content from a couple different spaces. I like podcasts, and usually for me, it's a mix of like financial fire podcasts and real estate podcasts. Yeah, I don't know. There's no specific. The guys over at Casual Fridays, Seth over at Ari Tipster. There's a couple places that are like higher on my list that like I get to, but most of the time I spend most of my time learning from my network, right? I spend a lot of time trying to build that network and making those connections so that when I don't know how to do something, I can lean on them. Be like, hey, who has solved this problem and how did you solve it? Because that gives me that jumping point. And I can trust like firsthand accounts as opposed to some like neutered version that they put on the podcast and like maybe overly optimistic or it may not be 100% accurate 12 months on. So I need like a fresh firsthand today account of like how they solved it last month.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. That's really awesome. So let's talk about what are some of the top deal breakers that you have that you'll say, I will not do a deal if it has this component to it.
I have a new one we just added, which is never do a deal with a class 2 dam on it. That was a new learning lesson. I'm in the middle of that one. It's very raw on paper right now, but yes, that's a new one. Never do a deal with class 2 dam. Like never do deals. Gosh, I don't know, never do a deal. I'm trying to think. I probably block these things from my mind as they get added to my checklist. But right. We don't do stuff that we can't access legally, right? If I can't legally get to it, you could buy it and sell it, but I don't want it. Legal access is a have to for us. Most of the time that means physical access of some kind, but that's not an absolute have to. Yeah, I guess it really just comes down to, we don't have a lot of like things are really hardcore on that front. So it's really just those.
For your buyers, do you have to make sure that there's access to water and electricity, or is that not really that big of a...
Nah, doesn't matter.
Wow.
Yeah, I hardly check utilities at all. I'll tell them, I think there's a power like a half mile away, so that's cool, but they just don't care. The rural buyers they don't expect that. If it's there, cool. But if it's not, if it's there, it's a bonus attribute. If it's not a requirement.
That's really good. So thinking about what it was like being a newbie in the land space, what would you consider to be the most important needle moving actions that you can take daily as a newbie if you want to be successful in the land business?
I think when it comes to tactical actions, it's really just getting the reps in. So you have to send some kind of marketing. It doesn't matter if it's text or mail or whatever. You have to get some marketing out because you have to have some seller calls. If you don't have some acquisition calls, then you will have nothing to buy and you'll have no experience buying things. And then you just have to get some kind of deal under contract. Don't buy a bad deal, but it doesn't have to be amazing. Just buy something because you will then know what it's like to move through at least one deal, right? And then you have to sell it. So it's really just taking the next tactical step. Don't let yourself get caught up. I'm an Uber planner, but you can't let yourself get caught up in whatever the steps too far down the road are, because if you don't take the time to just take whatever the next tactical action is, you're always going to be like overly concerned about steps 5 rows, down. You got to be whatever the next step is. And as long as you're hyper focused on the next step, whatever that is, it's written down, it's like on your calendar, what it is and when you're going to do it, then you will just bulldoze through all of it without issue, right? You will make it all the way through. You just have to make sure that whatever the next step in the process is, you do it. And I recommend people when they take a training course, read through all the way through acquisitions and then send mail. Don't worry about learning all of the transaction coordination. Don't worry about learning all of the sales and how to build it. It doesn't matter. Freaking send the mail. Okay. And then go back. Now you've done that. Cool. That you've got a tactical step you've taken. What's the next one? I think that enables people to just stay focused, right? Because then if they get too far deep, they get distracted by just too many things to do.
Yes. I literally need that on a poster, on a shirt, on a pillow. I need what you just said because I see so many people getting caught up in, oh, I need to know what to do in the dispo process. And I'm like, you haven't even sent out any marketing yet. Let's focus on getting some leads coming in. So that's really good. Are you using AI in your business at all right now?
We do tactically. We use ChatGPT and Bard and whatever for a lot of ad copy or some data analysis, things like that. I don't find excuses to use it per se, but if I found that it's really helpful, we use it sometimes in video editing or picture editing, right? If we find systems that are like, oh, this is really nice. This will help us clean all of our pictures can have them look consistent. Amazing. Let's do that. We like to find ways to look for it. And so we'll try and take some time to pause and think with what we're doing now, is there a tool out there that's recently developed that we can leverage to make this faster? I also personally subscribe to a newsletter that just sends like a weekly update. And it's here are 5 interesting tools that were recently released. Here's some bits of news. That helps me keep my finger on the pulse of what's possible. And then when I see stuff trickle through there that's, oh, I could use that today, then I bring it to my team or I go test it out and I say, look, this is a cool new tool. I want to try looping it into this part of our process. Let's check it out.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I love that. So what do you think is something that no one in our industry or very few people in our industry are talking about right now that we should be talking about?
Yeah, that's a hard question for me to answer because I spend a lot of time talking to other land investors. And I hear a lot of wild ideas that people are testing. What is no one talking about? I think that one underutilized, and this is more of a later stage thing, it's not really an early game thing, but I think that a lot of land investors would be best served by bringing on a fractional CFO, because typically people wait far too long to bring on a fractional CFO. Like they just do. Like they could have learned a lot and got a lot of stuff cleaned up, identified their weaknesses in like structuring and returns and market spend and a lot of stuff about the financials. Like the financials yield a ton of interesting information about your business operations if properly managed. And a good or even a decent fractional CFO will help you pull out those insights in a way that you probably aren't doing today. So as your business grows to a scale that makes sense to bring on someone, has the revenue to do that, you should seriously consider bringing on a fractional CFO to help. Even if you like, I'm a financial nerd. I love it. But I like after bringing one on was like, oh man, he pays more attention to this than I do. That's perfect. That's what I need, right? I need him to pay attention when I'm too busy to pay attention. And so he helps. If they're experienced, they will bring out this insight that you didn't even think on how to cut the numbers in a way that showed you that this aspect of your business is like way more expensive than you really thought it was.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. And it always helps to have an outside view on your business, right? Especially when you're in it and you're in the trenches and you're working on it every day. It's really easy to miss some things and develop a blindness in a particular area. So that's a really good insight. Fractional CFO people, get it going. So what would you consider to be your superpower, JT?
I would say my superpower is using my technical expertise and interest and like combining that with systems. I just generally like systems as a strong business pillar. And then I'm exceptionally good at taking the technical expertise and combining those together. And we have multiple, probably earlier than most businesses our size would have, we have been able to create like custom tools to solve problems for us at scale, right? For example, I have a custom tool that allows me to pre-check every property we send mail to. So every property I send a letter to has been looked at by somebody. And the only way that works at scale is I have a tool that makes it really easy. And so like that for me is I realized that's something I wanted, right? Like I wanted us to be able to only send mail to the best so that we have the most qualified leads only for property we want. So that's part of our design. So I was like, okay, how do I do this? Either I hire like a massive team of VAs and hope none of them get it wrong, or I build a tool to make it really easy to get wrong, like really easy to to get it right and then hard to get it wrong. And then I can put a smaller group of VAs towards that and train them really well. Yeah. So I think that is where I excel, is recognizing that and seeing how those things can help solve our problems probably faster than you would unless the scale was bigger. Then it's a different kind of problem. But
Yeah, that is very cool. I love that. What's your definition of success?
I think the simplest way to put it is, do I enjoy the game? Like from a business perspective, like I could quit playing the game today, but I don't want to. I like the game. The game is fun and I've got to keep playing it until such time as it's no longer fun. And then I'll find another game. It's exactly what happened in my career. Like I kept playing that game and it was awesome until one day I just wasn't having fun anymore. And then I quit my job and started doing land. And now I'm having fun again. And then when that stops, I'll find something else to do.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think you definitely show up differently when you just genuinely have joy in what you do. So I love that you use that as a North Star kind of thing. So in your opinion, what do you do differently than others in our land space that contributes to your success?
There are a lot of talented people in the land space, so I don't want to say that I'm the only one doing a lot of these things, but one of the things that I excel at is challenging the status quo, like not accepting the answer I receive as the answer. And if they say this is the way it has to be done, I'm like, but is it really? Does it have to be done that way? And sometimes that's challenging my own assumptions that are baked in from the community, just experience from other people feeding into me. And I'll have these baked in assumptions like this has to be this way. And that's not always the case. I like to find, even if I think it probably is true, I will often still double check. I'll find a way to challenge that and see, is there a better, easier, faster way to do this? And then try and make that work. And if it cannot, then I will go back to my assumption. That's fine. But now I know it wasn't just guessing, right? Like I've tested it and it did or did not work out. And sometimes that's led to some really interesting breakthroughs on doing things in a way, or doing just things that are different than a lot of other people are doing.
I love that. I like that. That just speaks directly to my core, because that is the first question that I always ask. Does it have to be done this way? Sometimes it's good not to reinvent the wheel, but sometimes we can improve the wheel. So I really like that. That's very cool. What's the biggest surprise you've had so far on your land journey? Let me rephrase that. What's the biggest surprise you've had so far in your land journey?
The biggest surprise was that land investing isn't investing. I mentioned that earlier, but that really was like the shocking revelation to me several months in or a year in, was like, holy crap, I got tricked into a business. Because if you had asked me 6 years ago, JT, would you like to run a business? I'd be like, heck no. I don't like people. I don't like business. I don't do any of this jazz. Just give me a place to put my money and be quiet. Like that was my plan. And then somehow now I run multiple businesses. Like what happened? Like where in that process did I become okay with like literally running businesses and creating teams and managing this nonsense? And I think that it really came down to me realizing that if I wanted to realize my ambitions, it was the only way. Like that was the only way I was going to do it. And so it was either give up my ambitions or change. And so change I did.
That's great. That's really good. You're right. It's not investing. It is a business. It's transactional and you got customers and all the things that come along with businesses. So that's definitely accurate. If you could go back and tell yourself 3 pieces of advice as a newbie in this business, what would they be?
I'm just thinking about the things I have told other new land investors recently as I talk to them. And I think that number one is probably understand your competitive advantage more than anything else today. Like we are not as saturated as house flipping, but compared to 5 years ago, there's like a gazillion people, right? So who do this now? So the days of shooting fish in a barrel are over. You need to understand like how you're different and what your superpower is, as you said, and really leverage hard on that. So once you understand what your competitive edge is going to be, then lean into that until you can grow. Because as I tell new people, they're like, oh, I'm going to send some mail into this group. And I'm like, look, send mail. But here's the thing. If you make it look like mine, I just sent 100,000 units last week. You're not keeping up. It's not going to happen. Don't waste your time. Okay.
Right.
Like I've been doing this for years. So don't do that. Do something different. Make me look like a moron by doing something really specialized and focused and blow it out of the water. That's what you have. You can't scale like me, not yet. So you got to start somewhere. So understand what your superpower is and lean into it. And I would say, don't expect rushed success. And a lot of people say this, but like it's simply true. You can't assume that it's going to be amazing, like on month one, day one, sometimes even year one. Like I would say in 6 to 12 months, you should know if it's going to work or not. But don't assume 60 days in, if it's not working, that it's the end. If I had given up 60 days in, I wouldn't be running the multi-million-dollar business I am now. Like because it looked terrible. Like it was good at first and then it was horrible for a while. And I was like, I'm going to go broke. This is horrible. But I just kept trunking through it because I knew that I saw other people doing it and that I could figure it out. And so sometimes you can't just take the early successes or losses and say, this is it. This is, the only way it's going to be. And then I guess the last piece would be like, don't forget that this is just a piece of life. Like I the type who can get super obsessed over what I'm doing and spend all my time on it, but it's really just one portion of my overall life. And so I've had to make sure that I put checks and balances in place on my checklist are things that are important that are not business. Usually my checklist is like all business. And over the years, I've had to add things to the top that were like not business. Did I get this done? How I had a really good conversation with my kids today. Okay, then I should probably go figure out how to do that first and then worry about adding that new support person.
That's really good. That's a big one. That is a really big one because I think so many business owners who just love what they do, because we talked about that earlier. You have to chase that joy, love what you do. And when you love your business, it can get really easy to just be swallowed by it. So in that same vein, what's your biggest passion or goal you'd like to achieve at this point in your life?
Right now, it's really around business. My other parts of my life are very comfortable and stable. I don't really have any ambitions on there. Just keep doing it until I die. So the business is really where I'm focused and ambition wise. And that's just like our goal, our revenue goal next year is 10 billion. And so we're just laying all the groundwork to get there. So we just everything needs to be in place.
Yeah, right on. And so what inspires you the most?
I would say the thing that inspires me or maybe drives me is the fear of regret. I just don't want to regret not having done whatever it was I was capable of doing. The Lord gave me a certain level of capability, and if I don't fulfill it, I'll be really disappointed, and I do not regret. Now is the chance for me to get after it. And again, like I'll keep doing it until the game's not fun, and then I'll do something else.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's awesome. That's really good. JT, I want to thank you so much. You've been so generous in sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. How much, what can we give back to you right now? What are you looking for? What kind of resources? How can we give back to you?
Honestly, my two big focuses right now are hiring overseas disposition talent. I need to hire a really good full-time dispositions person. That's like my number one hire on my list. And so I want to see if I can source the level of talent that I need overseas. I don't know if I can or cannot, but I will try. So that's one thing I'm really working on. And the other is hard money for land. I cannot find good hard money for land. So that is the other part. I'm always about that hard money for land. So yes, maybe Brad and I'll have to chat later, but I'm all about that funding.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JT. This has been amazing. So packed with information and knowledge and insights. So I hope everyone got as much value out of it as I did. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and for being an audience and just hanging with us this Thursday evening. So everyone be great. Have a good one. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care and talk to you soon. Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing from other seven-figure land flippers about how they've started and run their businesses, then join us at OnlyLandFans.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.